you're a leader, don't pigeonhole your team, don't pigeonhole your people. If you see a gift in them, don't just say, I think you should be this. Acknowledge the gift, but say, hey, let's figure out, what do you want out of life? What dreams light you up? Because then maybe the passion and the dreams, as well as the gifts that we can see on the outside, then we might be able to help come alongside you and place you where you're really meant to be. Because if you want to make a difference in the world, you need to be walking in alignment with the way God made you.
Hey, welcome to Made for More. My name is Aaron Burke. We have a special bonus episode today, and it's the first month that we are releasing this series of podcast episodes. And so we threw in a bonus one with one of my friends who I think is one of the greatest leaders out there. We got Graham Cochrane with me today, and Graham is a beast of a leader. You are going to hear some nuggets of gold that I think are going to help you. I think it's going to help you walk into the more that God has for your life. So before we get into our conversation, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that. Share this podcast. Graham, you're a legend, dude. And I've gotten to know Graham very well the last couple of years. He's part of the church that I lead here in the Tampa Bay area. And Graham, I want you to give people a little bit of the behind the scenes, a little bit of the backstory, because if they see you on social media today, they see you on CNBC and Forbes and doing what you're doing, like you've done so much. You've already released one book. Your second book's coming out, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But give us the backstory of what seems like an overnight success that probably took a long time.
Oh man. Well, it's been 15 years, right? I was literally talking to somebody that said, wow, like it feels like you just blew up. I'm like, well, I've been doing this for 15 years and I was hoping I blew up a long time ago. Right. So, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not doing what I thought I was going to be doing. And I don't know if anybody can relate. Like I was trying to become a rock star, and we can get into a little bit of it as it relates to the new book, but that was my dream, become a professional musician, sign a record deal by 22, graduating college. God had different plans for my life. I'm still using music and I get to do some of that at Radiant, which is awesome. But God opened the door for something during the global recession that never expected, which was to get into content creation, to get into podcasting. I started a YouTube channel in 2009 about music recording. It was the most random thing if you look at it on paper, but if you look at it now in reverse, like, Steve Jobs says, you really can like connect the dots when looking backwards. It really makes a lot of sense that God basically took me from being a performer to using the gift of communication and performance to helping educate and create content for people. So the last 15 years, I've been creating online courses and communities and coaching in both the music space, now in the business space, and helping people build businesses and lives that are flexible, that are meaningful, that make an impact. And it's been a wild, wild ride. And the last 2 years have been really fun to connect with you as our paths have crossed, because I see you doing the same thing, but in the church and leadership space, which is leveraging your gifts, using the platforms to reach more people, create content. You're pumping out content every single week on the platform at church. And man, it's the greatest thing ever to be able to create something, put it out there in the world, and actually impact somebody's life. So I'm having a blast doing it.
Okay, so before we get into what you're doing right now, I just want to go back a little bit, because your story is so remarkable for the fact that, you want to be a rock star. You start creating this stuff to teach people music, right? How did you get into this world? Like, where did these ideas come from? How did you like make a living off of this?
Man, we were broke. I needed to figure something out. We moved to Tampa in 2009 with some friends. We were starting a church, and that's what got us down here. And I was like, I'll be the volunteer worship guy. That's what I was asked to come do. And so we were young. We were excited. I was 26. My wife and I were both around 25, 26, pregnant with our first. And we said, sure, let's move 1,000 miles away from home. We were in Virginia before that. Plant a church, which we thought would be easy. You know what that's like. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's harder than business, I think. And then I got a job in 2009. So if you were around in 2009, there was something going on called the global financial crisis. It was hard to get a job, period. And I got a job. We moved, bought a house. First daughter was born. And then I lost that job, which is not usually the order you want to do it. And so here we were. We didn't know anybody except for the people we came to plant with. I'm 26. I'm 4 years away from my music rock star dream that kind of came to a crashing halt. And we can get into some of that too. I felt, because I think it's relevant to a lot of people. So I felt like I was just moving backwards in life. Like, I'm 4 years out of college. I have no idea what I'm doing. We were so broke. My wife asked if we could go on food stamps, or at least apply for food stamps. They call it SNAP. now, but she had a friend whose husband lost his job in construction. And she's like, babe, they're getting like all their groceries paid for. Like, we're broke. We need to do this. And I said, no.
Wow.
I told Shay, no, I was like, there's no way. I literally said, and this is something that was, it's embarrassing to say, but it was important to go through. I said, we're not that kind of people. I shouldn't be getting handouts. Like, I have a college degree. I've always had a job since I was 14. Like, I should be able to provide. And it was a pride moment. But I remember she came back to me like 2 weeks later. She's like, babe, please, can we apply for this? And I finally relented. We were on food stamps for 18 months, most humbling period of my life. And it was in that season where I just was like, I don't want to go back to a job. Like, it just never, because I'm a creative. It never made sense for me. So I was both, the pain of like going back to work was worse than the pain of being broke. And so I felt, this is literally what I felt God tell me to do, which was to start a business helping record music for bands and for musicians. I had an audio engineering background. I made music, but it was always like side fun money. And I felt like he was saying, this is your time to go all in. And so I started a blog. I started a YouTube channel thinking I would get some leads for the service-based business. And what that turned into was an actual content business, meaning people were more interested in the content I was putting out than hiring me. And that blew me away in terms of what was possible. I had no idea what kind of business model existed back then. And so I just kind of was figuring it out as I went. But yeah, we went from needing to make money. That's why I started a business. I tell people I never wanted to start a business. And if God hadn't forced me towards that cliff financially, as it were, like, I probably wouldn't have, because I was just too scared.
Yeah.
I'm not usually a risk taker. I just like certainty too much. But God like pried that out of me. And so that I'm so glad he did, because not only has it changed our lives and changed a lot of other people's lives, but I have a greater tolerance for trying crazy things and seeing the benefits of that than just playing it safe all the time. And I'm grateful for that.
So talk to me through those early days. You're trying new stuff. Who's coaching you through this? How are you learning? So talk to the pastor that's starting, talk to the business leader that's starting out, and they're like, I'm in the early days. I want to be a win too. I'm trying. Like, how did you make it?
I had no help. I had no human help. I really wish I did. Yeah. So get a mentor, get around somebody that's done it before you, or at least have somebody that can like walk you off the ledge, right? Like, it was me and Shay, my wife. That was pretty much it. Unfortunately, I was planting this church, and my friend who was the pastor of the church we were planting, he didn't know how to help me either. He felt bad that I was unemployed. He didn't have a business background, so he just didn't understand. So I felt like I had no one to talk to. So if you can find someone who's in business, or find someone who's planted a church or leading a church, have that friend. I know you've got a circle of like pastor buddies where like you at least understand the pain and the joys of it. But outside of that, I mean, it was really like, looking back, it was the Holy Spirit like leading me. It was like these random hunches, these random intuitive ideas, as some people say, wow, you have a lot of intuition. And I was like, I think it's the Holy Spirit. I didn't even have good internal Christian language for that even back then. But I feel like I was being guided by something outside of me of, try this idea, post this kind of content, try this way of selling something, like, because I don't know where those ideas were coming from. So it was maybe being quiet enough to listen to those still small voices. But also just the way I thought of it was control the controllables. Like, if you could imagine how scary it is, right? When you have no income, and if you've been there, you know what it's like, where you feel like it's out of your hands. And so my way of calming myself down was having some controllables, meaning I'm going to go into my home office, AKA the spare bedroom that was never intended to be the home office, my little baby's like crying on the other side of the door. Shay's trying to like be a mom, and we're brand new, but I'm going to go in every day between 9 and 5, and I'm going to output as much content or connect with as many people, do whatever I can do. And it felt like not enough, but that's all I could do. And it gave me some peace to like, okay, I have something to focus on, something to do, and let God do the rest, and then wait for those inflection points of, hey, someone invited you to this thing, or someone's interested in this thing, or this seems to be working more than these things. Pay attention here. And so it was not glamorous. Like it looks like I teach this stuff, but it was panic mode in my brain.
It is so brilliant because, Graham, you're a master at going, I'm going to make the most of what God's putting me in right now. And I remember just a few months ago when you did your first TED Talk, and like, it's a big deal. I'm sitting with a guy who's done a TED Talk, and you would have thought it's the only thing going on in your life right then. You're going, this is the opportunity God's put in front of me right now. And I'm like, I bet if I went back 15 years ago, 13 years ago to that Graham, it was like, okay, this piece of content is all I've got right now. I'm going to make the most of it. And that's a secret that people need to know. It's like it's, if you wait for the big opportunities, they'll never come. If you steward the little opportunities God gives you every single day, it's remarkable what God will bless you with. And what God's blessed your life with is remarkable since then. Okay, a couple of years ago, you launched your first book. And just give people a little bit of an idea of what it was about, because it kind of goes off of what your whole business was.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started my business teaching musicians how to like set up a home recording studio. And when that became a business and then a successful business, which surprised everybody, especially me, then I had one article written about me in Business Insider, back in 2015. And that was like, I had a friend who had been featured in Business Insider. There was a journalist who was just doing like pieces on people with interesting work. And my friend was like, oh, you've got to talk to this guy, Graham, because he's got a really cool, like random music business. And so this girl interviewed me. She wrote a piece on Business Insider and in a way went viral. Like Yahoo picked it up, is on the front page of Yahoo and a couple other places for like 48 hours. It was like this headline. And it was everywhere to the point that like my mother-in-law was like, you make how much money? Like nobody knew what I was doing. They just knew I was no longer broke. And so when that went out, people were really interested. How is this guy talking about something as weird as home recording and music production, a very specific niche, as it were, and he's able to have this successful business and it takes so few hours. Like I got all these emails and messages of like, hey, can you teach? I don't care about music. I don't care about what you do.
Right.
I'm just interested in how you do it, right? And I know you get that. Like, what's happening with Radiant? Like, how is it working? And so those are the kind of calls I got. I jumped on like Zoom calls with strangers and like coached them for free, because to me, I was like, well, here's the business model and here's how I'm doing it. And maybe it'll help you with your gym that you're trying to bring online, or you teach French and you want to get more people online, or you teach piano, like whatever it is, if you're already doing it in the physical world, you should be doing it in the digital world if you want to reach more people. Or if you never thought about it, you can monetize what you know. So I started coaching people for free because it was just fun. And that's what led me to start my second business, which is what I've been doing the last 6 or 7 years, which is helping entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs start a business. And so I've been teaching this stuff now for 6 or 7 years formally. And then I just had this dream of like, for years, I want to write a book. Your book came out and it's the same deal of like, look, I've been blessed by books. Right. I want to add something meaningful to the catalog. And so when I was like sitting around during COVID, like a lot of people like, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I was like, it was Valentine's Day dinner with Shay. And she said something about, you keep talking about you want to write a book. Like, why don't you just write the darn book?
Right.
So that like put the fuel in the fire to do it. And that's when I followed the whole journey of, okay, well, how do you get a book? How do you get a book deal? And when it was like, what should I write about? It was like, well, I think the world needs alternative ways of making a living. I think we're primed for teaching more people this stuff. So that's what the book, How to Get Paid for What You Know, is all about. It's literally the idea that you're sitting on a gold mine, which is your knowledge, your experience, your point of view sometimes. It doesn't have to be new knowledge. It can just be your unique point of view on the knowledge that can make it meaningful for people. And I just walk people through the steps of how you build an audience online for whatever that is. And then how do you monetize that audience? There's a lot of ways to do it. And how do you make it a sustainable business so that you can actually do it for the long haul? Because there's a lot of people, and I'm sure this is the same in the church world. This is kind of a random thought, but there's a lot of people that show you how to build things, but it's not sustainable.
Yep.
Like you can push and you can hustle and you can make money, you can build a movement, but then why are people burning out so quickly? Because the model that they've built it on is not sustainable. And so sustainability is a big part of what I teach, but that's what that book's about.
Okay, so I think that's so huge, the fact that, your first book was basically teaching people everything you know. Like, that's huge. Your second book is such an inspiration. I mean, I don't endorse a lot of books. I also don't get asked to endorse a lot of books, but I did endorse this one. And so
I'm honored.
I love it. I love the idea. The title is Rebel. It releases September the 3rd. And I think I'm one of your first interviews, so I hope so. But you're going to see Graham everywhere promoting this. And it's a great read. Graham, give us the why. Give us, where did this idea come from? What is it about?
This is a total Holy Spirit download. One of my friends, John Gordon, who's a brilliant author, he wrote The Energy Bus, The Carpenter. He's a great leader and thinker. I had the privilege of spending a day with him, and I was trying to ask him, how do I become like a legit public speaker like you? Like, what's the blueprint? Like 10 years, I want to be doing what you're doing. And he was not interested in talking about that at all. And so this, like, pro tip, if you're with like a leader or a mentor, right, that like maybe they don't want to answer the questions you want to ask, but they have something for you in that moment. So the conversation shifted. He said, well, what's the message of your second book going to be? And I had just released the first book like 9 months prior. I was like, bro, I'm happy, clap for me. I got a book out in the world. Like, I have no idea. I'm not even thinking that far ahead. I know some authors have like 4 or 5 books in their head. I hadn't gotten that far. So he was pressing me on it. Long story short, I couldn't get clarity on what I wanted to write next. And so he said, well, tell me your life story. And I told him my life story. And it was, everyone's saying, go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to be a rock star. And then the rock star dream died. And then, lose my job. I didn't want to get another job. My family and friends were like, you should get a job. I'm like, no, I'm going to start this random blog and about audio. And he's like, bro, you don't do what people tell you to do you? You're a rebel. And I said, a rebel? And in that moment, it was like, Aaron, like, that's language I've never used for myself. Yep. But in a moment, though, like, it actually clarified my story a little bit more. And in the sense that, like, oh, wait a second, what really is a rebel? A rebel isn't just someone that breaks the law. A rebel is someone who sees the system, sees the status quo, and says, that's not for me.
Right.
And if I were to do what everyone else is doing, I would be being inauthentic to who I am. And so to me, a rebel is someone who actually goes against conformity because he or she wants to bring the world their fullest, truest, most authentic self. And that means your talents, your personality, your gifts. It actually means being the way God made you to be.
Yep.
Because you were designed a certain way on purpose. And if we're fighting our design, that's probably why we're frustrated in life. So really the book came out of like my story and the way I've seen other people who I respect. I'm like, yeah, they didn't do what people told them to do either. Not just to buck the status quo, but again, how about I have the courage to ignore what everyone's saying I should do in the sense of like, let me do the deep work of finding out how God made me. Who am I? How am I wired? And then can I show up that way fully in all these areas of my life so that I can be fruitful, so that I can have more joy? Because I'll put it this way. I think the key to success, satisfaction, which you can have success without satisfaction, by the way, and service to others, which I think we want all 3 of those S's. We want to be successful at whatever we do. We want to be satisfied in the work we do in life. We want to serve people. The key to all 3 of those things is to do it your way, I think. In other words, be a rebel. Like, you have to find your path. And so that's what this book is ultimately about.
I think there's so many church planners that are watching this or listening to this, and you need to get the book because it describes them perfectly. Because so many of them, it's like, what makes you think that you want to, we call it parachuting in, like going into a city, you don't know anybody, you're starting something from scratch. It's so opposite of normal thinking. And it's because you're a rebel. You don't want to do it the way everybody else has done it. Or maybe you're starting that nonprofit and it connects with you when Graham's talking. You're like, yeah, I think outside the box. I think of Joseph and he's one of 12, but for some reason, Joseph has a dream that's different than the others. Like there's just that weirdness inside of us to go, I know I'm unique and I don't want to do it the way everybody else wants me to do it. And I think this book's going to resonate with you. And so there's rebels listening to this. There are people that are sitting there going, how do I walk this thing out? You're talking about being authentic to yourself of who God has called you to be. How do you figure that out? How do you figure out who you are? How self-awareness and what is my gift? What do I have to offer?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? A lot of people doing good work in this kind of, the framework I teach in the book, I call it the Rebel Framework. It's a simple acronym, spells rebel. It's 5 parts, but it starts with the R, which is to resolve to dream again. And this is one reason why I asked you to endorse the book, because I feel like there's so much alignment with Unfair Advantage that dreaming is something that I actually, when I had a dream, it made so much sense as a kid. Dreaming was the most natural thing to do, and I think it is for most people. Desire. If you don't like the word dream, substitute desire, hope, ambition, goal, something you long for or you imagine that could be true. It can even be a dream against injustice. Like, just imagine this being solved, this problem being solved. Like, I think that's our natural default state. But then if you ever have a dream die, like I did when my rock star dream died, it really changed things for me. Like, I felt really stupid.
Talk about really that, because people have all had that moment where that thing has died. How did you handle that?
Yeah, so this is like a place that I call the identity crisis intersection. Okay, and everyone has had one or will have one. I've had multiple. I think I'm in one right now, to be honest. It's an interesting season in my own life. But it's like you have a dream, and that dream might be a ministry dream. It might be a career dream. It might be a financial dream. It might be a relationship dream. Want to get married. I want to have a kid, whatever it is. You have that dream, and then for whatever reason, that dream dies. Either you had the dream and it fell apart, so the relationship ends, that dies. You had the financial dream and then the finances fell away, that dies. Or in my case, I never quite got the dream. Right. So pursuing the dream, it fell short. For me, it was like I wasn't getting any record deals that had money attached to them, and I was engaged to be married. I had development deals, meaning we're not going to pay you yet.
Right.
We'll sign you and see what you do. And I was like, I'm about to get married. I need money. So that's why my rock star dream died. We have a dream died. All of us have had that point. At that point, you're at this really tender spot that I call the identity crisis intersection, because dreams are not this external thing. They're so tied to who we are that if your dream dies, even if it's a small dream, part of you dies with it. Mm-hmm. Part of your identity dies with it. That's why they're so painful. And that's why they're so amazing when they come true. So what do you do when you're at this identity crisis intersection? Well, I posit that you have two choices. You could go left, which it's like a fork in the road. You can go left, which is the path of conformity. Get right back in line with what everyone else is doing. That was stupid. You know, thinking I could be a rock star, that was stupid. Everyone's asking me, oh, how's the music dream going? It was embarrassing to tell people. I felt really dumb, so I said, you know what? I'm just going to go get a regular job, keep my head down. I sold jewelry. I sold video games. I sold radio advertising. I worked at a software company. I just put my head down, pay my taxes, go to church, be a husband, don't dream again. That was like the path. And if you have a relationship dream die, like you get the divorce happens,
right?
Never going to pursue marriage again. You know, you lose a child, too painful. We're not going to work. Like that's it. It's stupid of me to dream. That is a choice you can make. I made that choice. It didn't end up very well for me. It was 4 years of like, I don't like this. But you have another choice. And that choice is to dream again. That might mean pursuing that same dream another time or 100th time, or that might mean dreaming a different version of the dream or pursuing it in a different way. But I think the way to live a fully alive life and to live a life that's aligned with who you are is to go back to the place of what do I dream about? What could I dream about now? Because if we're not dreaming, then we're not paying attention to who we are. And I don't think the point of life is to have all your dreams come true. I think the point of dreaming is to figure out the clues as to the way God wired you.
Very good.
And that's the first part of self-awareness is what do I dream about? What do I long for? There's a clue there for you.
Okay, so if people are going, that sounds amazing, but how do I get to an environment or even a state to where I can dream again? Have you any tricks in this? Like, do you take a weekend away? Do you you do this with your wife? Like, how do you get to that place? Is it just prayer? Is it like, what do you do to practically dream again?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I like to get out of my environment. So if you can, even if that means going to a different part of town, sitting in a different coffee shop, sitting, on a park bench in a different part of your city, look at something different visually for sure. But you have to treat it as work. Like if you were given an assignment, and I give a bunch of assignments in the book. So it's like, I treat the book as like a coaching session or multiple coaching sessions in a book. And so in this section of the book, I give people an exercise I call the 50 Dreams exercise. And it's really simple. You can do it yourself, which is you force yourself to write down 50 things you dream of doing, being, or having.
It's very good.
And you don't share it with anybody because especially if you're a Christian or if you come from the church world or the faith background, there is a lot of judgment that you're going to ascribe potentially to your own dreams that no one's looking at it, but you're going to not write something down because maybe I shouldn't dream that or want that, or this should be a judgment. This is just to get stuff out of your head. Like God knows what you want. So you can't fool him and no one else is looking.
Yeah.
So, but it's really to get it down, 50 things you dream of wanting, doing, or having. Now, depending on your personality also, this might be easy or hard. For me, when I did this for the first time years ago, it took me a week.
Wow.
I couldn't come up with 50 things because I had so much judgment of, I shouldn't want stuff, or I don't know. I had lost touch with who I was. And I did this exercise with my two daughters. They're 14 and 12. My oldest daughter, 20 minutes, she's got 50 things. My youngest, 20 minutes later, we did this at the dinner table. She's like, Dad, I got 3 things. It's just, so personalities are different, but you get 50 things down just to get it out of you. Some things might be huge. Like I want to live in, a different country. Some things might be small. Like I really want to go to Disney World sometime. And that might not be small. Maybe that's huge. Maybe it's, I really want to learn Spanish. I never have. Or maybe it's, I really want to, whatever it is, you write it down. you narrow it down to the top 10 things. And if I could only have 10 of these come true, what would they be? Which is like, an important sort of filtering. But then I think the most interesting part of this is then of those top 10, why? Why would you want these top 10?
It's really good.
And you might not know why, and you don't have to justify. Like I think Dan Sullivan says in 10X is easier than 2X, he says that like wants don't need to be justified. They're not needs. I don't need to take this trip. I don't need to, it's just a want. You don't have to justify it. But I think for yourself, it's interesting to ask yourself why, because again, we're looking for data. I just want to better understand myself. Because if I better understand myself, then as we get through the framework, we can start to really craft an intentional life or ministry or business that's not the way he runs his church or she runs her business, which is what we're falling into is like, I want success and they're successful, therefore I must do it like them. And then we wonder why either it doesn't work, or if it does, we have the success, but we don't have the satisfaction and it's not as impactful. We don't have the service because it's not the way we're designed.
All right, let's keep going through the rebel. So E.
So the E is establish the outcomes you want in life. So this is taking the 30,000-foot view of desires and bringing it down to the ground. And a simple question that's a profound question, I think, is to ask, is the 3 year, I call it the best 3 years of your life framework, which is, I stole this from Rich Lippin. He's a brilliant coach, but it was the most helpful thing for me. Instead of a 10-year goal, like I don't like 10-year goals because they're just too far out. Like I'm going to be a totally different person.
I agree. I totally agree.
1 year goals are a lot of times overly ambitious. Like that's why New Year's resolutions fail. Like they're exciting. They get you motivated because it's close, but it's hard to get a lot done in a year. 3 years is like a magical time frame, right? In 3 years, it's like close enough to my season of life. I can pretty much imagine my family, myself, like it's pretty much where I'll be-ish. But also you can do a lot of damage in 36 months.
You can.
You can change your marriage in 36 months. You can change your body in 36 months. You can change your business in 36 months. So I think the 3 year question, which is simply this, Aaron, imagine you and I bump into each other 3 years from now, and sadly we haven't talked in 3 years, which would be a travesty. But imagine that
devastating.
Is the case.
We cry.
First of all, and we hug each other, and then we eat a donut.
Yeah.
But it's 3 years later, and I'm like, Aaron, how the heck have you been, dude?
Right.
Since we did that podcast, and you say, Graham, it has been the best 3 years of my life. I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Why? Tell me about that. What would you be telling me about?
That is so good, Graham.
What would have to be true for you to say, in all honesty, it has been the best 3 years of my life? Again, we're getting clarity here. This isn't like we're going to somehow sidestep suffering. But the point is like start with desire. Like what is it deep? What matters to you on paper, and then journal it out. What's going on with your kids? What's going on with your career? What's going on with your finances? Like what would have to be true for it to be the best 3 years of your life? And take time, because the first things that come out might be true, or they might be the surface level stuff that you've convinced yourself is true. But when you sit with it, I think you start to get like a clarity of, oh man, this is what I need to be pursuing. Because I'll give you context. I have a lot of clients that are like, in 3 years, I want to be making $100,000 a month. But they do this exercise, and honestly, they're like, well, what I really want is I want more time with my kids. And I want to wake up and be excited about the work I'm doing. And even with my business being at the level it's at, I don't like what I'm doing anymore. I'm just managing people. They get really down to the real things that matter, and they need to see that in front of them, because that's what you've got. You've got time, bro. Let's go build that life.
I love that. All right, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to get as far into it, but I also kind of want to bait people a little bit to just go, hey,
like a John Maxwell thing, like you got to read the book.
Yeah. If you buy it right now, you'll get the rest of it. But give us one more takeaway from Rebel that you think applies, especially to our church leaders, maybe even some young business leaders that are just going, I know I'm that rebel. I know I'm that person I need to dream again. I got to get those right goals in line. What's one more takeaway?
Yeah, man, I would say like you're wired a certain way. Like, don't be ashamed of the way you're wired. And I was telling you before we hit record, even what was coming up for me when I was driving over here was I was saved at 16, but I didn't really follow Jesus till I was 22. Walk with him, right? I wasn't discipled, and this is just again a status, or like a point to say like, hey, disciple people, because you might have saved people in your world that don't know how to read their Bible or know what it looks like to follow Jesus. So that was me for 6 years. But at 22, I finally was in a church where guys grabbed me up and they said, hey, do you know how to read your Bible? Do you know how to be married to this beautiful woman you just married? I'm like, no, I don't know any of this stuff. And I didn't know that the Bible had anything to say about it and that it was relevant. So I started to read the Bible for the first time. I started to get involved in church. And I say all that to say that the church leaders around me saw this young 22-year-old and they said, hey, you've got communication skills. I've been a theater kid, a musician. I love being on stage, love being in front of people. You've got some leadership potential. You know what you need to be? You need to be a pastor. Because that's I see your gifts, therefore you should be a pastor. And they told me that's what you should do. You should go to seminary, be a pastor. Now, was it bad that they were encouraging me to chase this thing? No. What I found out later was that unless God's got something else in store for me, I'm not really meant to be a pastor, and he had something else planned. Same communication skill, same gift of leadership.
So true.
Same whatever people saw in me was there on purpose. But I've been able to impact millions of people around the world through businesses. And I didn't know a single entrepreneur. If I had an entrepreneur friend around me, they might have seen, hey, I think you should be a business owner or whatever. But I didn't have anyone speaking that into me. And so I was going down this path of being a pastor, and I could tell that I could maybe be good at it, but I also never felt at home with it.
Right.
But I felt ashamed that I didn't love this thing that they were asking me to do and encouraging me to do. I don't want that to be anyone listening to this. And I don't want anyone to pigeonhole someone else into this. If you're a leader, don't pigeonhole your team, don't pigeonhole your people. If you see a gift in them, don't just say, I think you should be this. Acknowledge the gift, but say, hey, let's figure out, what do you want out of life? What dreams light you up? Because then maybe the passion and the dreams, as well as the gifts that we can see on the outside, then we might be able to help come alongside you and place you where you're really meant to be. Because if you want to make a difference in the world, you need to be walking in alignment with the way God made you. You can do a lot out of alignment, but it's not going to be as much as you can when you're in alignment with God. And so I just want people to have the permission to be the way God made them, but don't just stay there. Like, this is who I am. Like, do the deep work to find out really who are you. In the book, we do an inner story audit. Like, we have to break a lot of negative thinking, awful scripts, mental scripts. Like, there's a lot of deep work you got to do, but it's so worth it because then you can actually show up the way you're supposed to show up. And can I just end with something that came up for me too? At the end of the book, bro, this is so weird. I'm asking the Lord as I'm writing this book, because again, this is a Holy Spirit download. How am I supposed to end this book? Because I felt like he was giving me the content as I was writing it. So it was very uncomfortable. Whereas my first book, I'd been teaching it for years and it was so easy. And I felt the Lord say, end the book with the parable, not the parable, but the story of Jesus casting out the demon of the guy who was like, couldn't be bound. And he was like breaking through the chains and people couldn't hold him down. I'm like, I'm flipping to like that story in the gospel. I'm like, what are you sure this is the story? Is there something in the story about being a rebel that I had no idea? I'm reading the passage, and it's when Jesus, he heals this guy who couldn't be bound. The demons are gone, and this guy's like just so grateful. And what does he want to do? He wants to come with Jesus. Right. Can I come with you and your disciples? And Jesus says no. He tells him no. And the reason he tells him no is because he says, go back home to where you're from. It might have been the Decapolis or the 10 cities. Go back home and tell them everything the Lord has done for you. I end the book that way because I think the whole process of becoming a rebel, finding out who you are, is not just so that you can live your best life or live the way you're designed. It's so that you can go back to the way where God put you, showing up fully as the way God intended you to live, not this sort of fake version of you or half-but version of you, or like, what I think I'm supposed to be. No, the full version of you. Imagine the full you, the real you, going back to your family, your church, your community, your business, and then operating at a place of authenticity. Imagine what kind of work you could get done for the kingdom, for your business, for the community. That's the purpose of being a rebel, is to go back to where you are and just like be all you.
The book is titled Rebel. It's by Graham Cochrane. I would challenge you, take your teams through it. When it releases, buy some for all your staff. Y'all go through it. It's only going to help them walk into the purpose God has for maybe your church staff. Bring them through it. Graham, thanks for the conversation. How can people find out more about you?
GrahamCochrane.com, The Graham Cochrane Show, or at The Graham Cochrane on Instagram.
Absolutely. And where can they get the book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. If you go to therebelbook.com, if it's still pre-order time, there's a bunch of bonuses you can get for free if you buy the book there.
I think this conversation was super helpful. I'm going to dream again. I might quit my job. No, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm keep going. All right. Well, thank you so much for being part of this episode, and we will see you next time on Made for More.